Have you ever opened YouTube, planning to watch something new, but somehow you end up watching a video you've already seen before? Not once, not twice, but again and again. Maybe it's a funny clip, a podcast moment, a movie scene, or a short video you've watched dozens of times. You already know what happens. You already know every moment, every joke, every line. And yet, you press play again. Why? Why would your brain choose something predictable instead of something completely new? After all, the internet offers endless content, millions of videos, millions of new things to explore. So why return to something you've already experienced? It turns out this strange habit reveals something fascinating about how your brain works. Because when you rewatch the same videos, your brain isn't being lazy. It's actually doing something very specific, something deeply connected to how humans deal with uncertainty, emotion, and mental energy. And once you understand this, your habit of rewatching things might suddenly make a lot more sense. Because this behavior is far more common than most people realize. Many people rewatch the same content over and over again. They rewatch the same movies, the same TV shows, the same YouTube clips, the same stand-up comedy moments, the same comfort creators, sometimes dozens of times, sometimes even hundreds, and strangely, it rarely feels boring. Instead, it feels strangely satisfying. But this raises an interesting question. In a world filled with endless novelty, why does the human brain sometimes prefer repetition? Why return to something you've already seen? Why replay the same moment again and again? To understand this, we need to look at how the brain handles uncertainty. Because uncertainty is something the brain constantly tries to manage. Every new experience contains uncertainty. New videos, new stories, new ideas, new information. Your brain doesn't know what will happen next, and that means it must stay alert. It must analyze, interpret, predict, evaluate. All of this requires mental energy. But when you rewatch something, that uncertainty disappears. Your brain already knows the outcome. It already knows the jokes. It already knows the emotional moments. Nothing is unexpected. And when the brain knows what will happen, something interesting occurs. It relaxes. Psychologists sometimes call this cognitive ease. Cognitive ease happens when the brain processes something effortlessly, when information feels familiar, predictable, easy to understand. Your brain loves this state because it means less work, less effort, less stress. That is why familiar things often feel comfortable. Think about your favorite song. You might have heard it hundreds of times, and yet you still enjoy listening to it. Think about your favorite movie. You already know the entire story, but watching it again still feels good. This is not accidental. The brain is wired to appreciate familiarity, because familiarity signals safety. When something is familiar, the brain doesn't need to stay on high alert. It doesn't need to analyze every detail. It can simply experience, and rewatching videos taps directly into that system. When you replay a video you already know, your brain enters a low-effort, comfortable mental state. There are no surprises, no unexpected information, just a familiar experience. And in a world where our brains are constantly overloaded with new information, that familiarity can feel incredibly relaxing. But cognitive ease is only one part of the story. Another powerful force is also involved. Dopamine. Dopamine is often described as the brain's reward chemical, but dopamine is not just about pleasure. It is deeply connected to anticipation. Your brain releases dopamine when it expects something rewarding, not just when it receives it, but when it anticipates it. This is where rewatching videos becomes interesting. When you watch something new, your brain doesn't know if it will be good. Maybe it will be funny. Maybe it will be boring. Maybe it will disappoint you. But when you rewatch a video you love, your brain already knows where the best moments are. The funny part, the powerful quote, the satisfying ending. And because your brain knows those moments are coming, it begins releasing dopamine in anticipation, even before they happen. This means rewatching something familiar can actually trigger a predictable reward loop. Your brain expects enjoyment, and that expectation itself feels good in a way. You are not just watching the video again. You are reliving the anticipation of the best moments, and anticipation can be incredibly powerful. But there is another important factor behind this habit: mental energy. Your brain is one of the most energy-demanding organs in your body, even though it represents only about 2% of your body weight. It consumes around 20% of your total energy. Because of this, your brain constantly looks for ways to conserve effort. New information requires processing. New ideas require interpretation. New stories require attention, but familiar information. Your brain already has the map. When you rewatch something, your brain doesn't need to process everything from scratch. It recognizes patterns instantly. It fills in missing details automatically. It predicts what comes next. This dramatically reduces cognitive effort, which is why people often rewatch content when they are tired, late at night, after a long day, or when they simply don't want to think too much. Rewatching becomes the mental equivalent of comfort food, familiar, easy, and satisfying. But the psychology behind this habit goes even deeper than comfort and dopamine. Because sometimes people rewatch videos not just for familiarity, but for emotion, and emotion plays a powerful role in memory. Some videos become linked to specific feelings, specific memories, specific moments in our lives. When you revisit those videos, you are not just watching content. You are reconnecting with those emotions. And this emotional connection is something the brain values deeply. But emotion is only part of the picture. Because sometimes rewatching a video is not just about comfort. It is about returning to a familiar mental space. Think about the last time you watched an old video you love. Maybe it reminded you of a certain year, a certain moment in your life, a time when things felt different. The brain stores memories in layers, and media often becomes tied to those memories. A song can bring back a specific moment. A movie can remind you of a specific time in your life, and a simple YouTube video can reconnect you with a feeling you once had. When you rewatch it, you are not just watching content. You are revisiting an emotional environment. This is why people often return to the same videos during certain moods. When they feel tired, when they feel nostalgic, or when they simply want something familiar. But there is another interesting psychological layer behind this behavior: control. The modern world is incredibly unpredictable. Information moves faster than ever. News changes every hour. Trends appear and disappear constantly. Notifications never stop. Our minds are constantly processing new information, and that constant novelty can become mentally exhausting. In this environment, familiar content becomes a small island of predictability. When you replay the same video, you know exactly what will happen. There are no surprises, no unexpected twists, no confusing information. Your brain already understands everything about that experience, and that gives it a subtle but powerful sense of control. Control may seem like a small factor, but psychologically, it is extremely important. Humans feel calmer when they understand their environment, when things are predictable, when outcomes are known. Rewatching familiar content temporarily restores that feeling, even if it is just for a few minutes. But there is another force that has amplified this habit dramatically in the modern era. Algorithms. In the past, rewatching something required effort. You had to find the DVD again, rewind the tape, or wait for the show to appear on television. But today, the internet has removed all friction. Videos are always available, and more importantly, platforms remember what you enjoy. Algorithms analyze what you watch, what you replay, what you finish, what you skip. And they use that information to recommend similar content. This creates a powerful feedback loop. The more you watch something, the more the platform shows you things like it. The more familiar your content environment becomes, and the easier it becomes to fall back into familiar patterns. Sometimes you might even open a platform without intending to rewatch something, but the algorithm presents a familiar video, a familiar creator, a familiar clip, and your brain immediately recognizes it. It feels safe, comfortable, predictable. So you click, and the loop continues. This does not necessarily mean the algorithm is manipulating you, but it does mean that your brain's natural preference for familiarity is being reinforced again and again and again. But despite all of this, rewatching videos is not necessarily a negative habit. In fact, it can serve a useful psychological purpose. Your brain is constantly balancing two forces: novelty and familiarity. Novelty helps us learn. It helps us grow. It helps us discover new ideas. But familiarity provides something equally important: stability, comfort, mental rest. If the brain consumed only novelty all the time, it would quickly become overwhelmed. If it consumed only familiarity, it would stop learning. So the mind naturally moves between the two, exploring new things and returning to familiar ones. This balance helps regulate our mental state, which means that rewatching a video you love is not necessarily a sign of boredom or lack of curiosity. Sometimes it is simply your brain choosing the most comfortable mental path in that moment. A small psychological strategy to reduce effort, reduce uncertainty, and reconnect with something familiar. But there is also something deeper hidden in this behavior, something almost philosophical, because in a world that constantly pushes us toward novelty, constantly pushes us toward the next thing, the next trend, the next video, the next idea, the human mind still seeks something ancient, something simple, something familiar. Humans are not just novelty-seeking creatures. We are also familiarity-seeking creatures. We return to the same music, the same places, the same stories, and sometimes the same videos. Not because we are stuck in the past, but because familiarity creates a sense of psychological grounding. It reminds us of something stable, something recognizable, something that does not change. And maybe that is why certain videos never lose their appeal, no matter how many times we watch them. Because every time we press play again, we are not just repeating an experience, we are reconnecting with something our mind finds valuable, something predictable, something comforting, something known, and in a world filled with endless new content. Sometimes the most satisfying thing your brain can do is return to something it already understands and experience it one more time.